A vital part of the environment. But even on the driest inhabited continent on Earth, we've misunderstood them, dismissed them as swamps, and often drained and destroyed them. In northern Victoria, one wetland is emerging as a wonderful example of nature's ability to regenerate with a bit of human help, as Landline's Tim Lee reports.
So this is Wirraloo Wetlands, which is 160 hectares, and we're in Murrabit West, so we're about 25 kilometres northwest of Kerrang.
Beautiful sunrise. That's stunning.
So we're on the lower Loddon River.
The dawn chorus heralds another day.
Dawn is fantastic because you do get the dawn chorus where all the birds are singing out, you know, re-establishing their territories or reaffirming their territories. We're going to head out and do a bit of a survey. We'll see if you can find those magpie geese. And we're here doing ecological surveys, so we're listening out for frogs, and during the day we'd be out sort of counting the birds.
Major floods in the spring turned this vast floodplain in northern Victoria into an inland sea.
All the farmland around here was all flooded and burnt and black and barren from the floodwaters. And this property here, Wirraloo, was just alive with life. It was an absolute gem in a sea of wasted farmland.
The wetlands really are the kidneys of an ecosystem. So it's where all the water kind of runs off the landscape and comes through the wetlands and basically gets filtered and cleaned. But the wetlands are also really important for flood mitigation. So we've got the kayaks, we can get out around the wetlands and count the numbers of birds. There's been a huge response ecologically from the October flood, and that flood waters are still here and it's sort of slowly drying back.
So, more than ever, it's a refuge for a multitude of species.
We've got the convergence of the Loddon River, the Avoca River and the Murray Rivers just to the north of us. So with those three rivers all sort of coming into this area, it's just created the conditions for lots of wetlands. So, for example, just on this property alone, there's 11 wetlands.
That abundance of water has brought an explosion of life. Vegetation, birds, insects, fish, and much more.
They're really absolutely key for a whole range of species. About half of the endangered species are reliant on wetlands in Victoria.
Really, come on.
Water, especially a generous irrigation allocation, attracted dairy farmers Ken and Jill Hooper to buy the property in the early 1990s. They quickly saw it was far more than a grazing paddock.
Well, it was the whole ambience of the place. It was everything, the tree lines, the creek lines, the change as you move through the place.
The treed creek lines, the wetland areas, the bush and all the rest of it, all being a bit eaten out by cattle, but we just fell in love with it and we used it from 92 till the early 2000s as part of our farming operation, and we saw that it was far, far too valuable for the community's biodiversity. That's the way we saw it. Jill and I are bush people. We grew up loving the bush. We both loved the natural environment, and we wanted to restore, protect what was here. It's rare in as much as that it hadn't been totally flattened with earth-moving machinery for agricultural production. There are still some areas that are somewhat like this.
In this region here, like up to 90% of the wetlands have been drained or cleared or cropped. So there's been a lot of clearing of the native vegetation.
Globally, wetlands are one of the most endangered of all ecosystems due to land development, pollution, invasive species, disrupted flows due to dams and water diversions, and a host of other reasons. It's evident here at McDonald's Swamp near Kerrang, where the big ancient trees were choked by salt.
In the past, a lot of irrigation water just seeped into the ground and actually added to the groundwater and brought up salt. And so in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the wetlands around here were very badly affected by salinity, and some of the wetlands were almost half seawater.
And I mean, this wetlands has got a bit of a sad history in a way.
Yeah, sure has. Well, you can see all the trees are drowned back there, so it ended up a bit like a tree cemetery where, because there was too much water for a certain time, the red gums couldn't survive and they all drowned. Just in the north-central Victoria, there's about 10,000 hectares of dead red gums where there's like tree cemeteries where all the trees have died.
Wirra Low may have suffered the same fate, if not for Ken and Jill's awareness of its ecological significance.
G'day Ken, how you going?
All right, Damien, how's yourself? Hello, Bob. How are you? I've been watching you fellas out there stirring up those black ducks.
How you going?
Good.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Bob, yeah. No, look, it's just wonderful. I've never seen as many black ducks here before, ever.
Healthy wetlands need a natural wetting and drying cycle. But a decade ago, reforms to the district's irrigation system, including the removal of connecting channels, almost left the property high and dry. Ken Hooper campaigned and convinced the authorities to allocate vital water.
It was the first time in Victoria that public water had been put on private land, so that created a whole lot of hassles. It took 3 years, but in May of 2015, almost to the day, the first environmental water flowed into the 4 wetlands, and the place just started to come alive. From that time on, it's been a developing, learning experience.
Now, water is assured, even in the worst of droughts, vital for many species, including 2 nationally endangered ones, the growling grass frog and the Australasian bittern.
Having environmental water on the properties and through the wetlands really has created a diversity which has attracted a number of species, but conditions have been favourable and we've been able to see the Australasian bittern back on site, which is a pretty special story.
When the males are trying to establish a breeding territory in the spring, they make a really deep booming sound. And so that's the way we can survey for them. We've actually recorded them here on a sound recorder, and we observed one here a couple of weeks ago. So that's really exciting.
The growling grass frog's rediscovery was another joyous moment.
And in November 2017, when the first one was recorded in one of the swamps, wow, that was great excitement. So it's gone from there. There's been other plants and birds.
Including the surprising sight of magpie geese, such a symbol of Australia's top end that few realise it once ranged across southern Australia, where its tasty flesh proved its downfall.
Yeah, they were shot to extinction in southern Australia by 1900. They were used from a meat bird, and so they were sold at the South Melbourne market, right up until they became extinct.
This population derives from birds brought from northern Australia some years ago, then nesting and breeding here. Now in their 80s, Ken and Jill recently decided it was time to part with their wetland. But who could they entrust to continue their work? They'd met Damien Cook, and this place inspired him to set up the non-for-profit Wetlands Revival Trust. Its aim is to protect and restore ecologically significant wetlands in the southern Murray-Darling Basin. Through crowdfunding, donations and grants, the Trust has raised enough money to buy Wirra Low, and now the sale is almost complete.
We wanted this property to be for the community, for scientific research, for environmental education, to protect a small amount of biodiversity so that people could learn what can be done.
The Trust works with traditional owners. There are relics here such as middens, and for First Nations people, this is a place of immense cultural significance. For traditional owner Uncle Ricky Kirby, a Barapa man, it's also a place of healing.
Culturally, it's like medicine when you see country coming back to its natural state. This place has changed that much. You wouldn't even thought that this was pastoral paddocks, to feed livestock. So that's how amazing this area's changed.
Oh, absolutely. You wouldn't recognise it as the same property. Yes. Now when you go there, it's like a little oasis.
Better irrigation and farming practices are also helping restore degraded wetlands across the region, trees for nesting sites, and to restore the environmental balance.
The idea with the Wetland Revival Trust, we really want to be working at a landscape scale. And that's the only way we can really effectively have conservation. It has to be spread across the landscape. It can't just be in little pockets of nature reserves. It needs to be along the whole river system, and we need private landholders to be involved as well, because lots of the wetlands in Victoria are on private land. So really, if we're not working with the farmers, then we're missing a huge chunk of the picture.
Productivity-wise, it helps because you've got the bird life that lives in swamps and wetlands and the associated bushlands that control pests and things on your agricultural areas. And from a living point of view, it is much better to live on a property that's got some bushland and some wetlands. And okay, a paddock full of hay bales or fat cows might look very good, and so they should to a good farmer. But if you combine some natural areas, really, really tops it off.
This landscape continues to transform and take on new importance.
The whole aim in the first place was when we left this earth, we left something behind. Yeah, so that was probably one of the driving forces. And one of the things we're delighted about now is the Indigenous people love what we're doing, and they will benefit from it too in the future.
We need more balance in the wider community too, and all over Australia. We need that balance back on land, with our bush and wildlife and trying to coexist with them. So it's all about balance to me. Maybe in the future we can use this as a cultural healing area too.
Jill and I are not scientists, we just love what it can do, but we listen to what the scientists are telling us, what they're finding here, what's come here, what is here, and that's just absolutely magic.